Free Mumia.
Grandfather, and an African American. I live in the fastest growing public housing tract in America. In 1981, I was a reporter for WUHY and president of the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists. Currently, I'm a writer, public radio commentator, and a resident on Pennsylvania's death row for more than 15 years.
To break free is to begin to heal the broken inner self, to save the soul from dancing with Chantal. But you see, the battle wages on, the battle wages beyond. As we sit unified and trying to identify, minutes are ticking away and seconds fly by. And I can hear the piercing cry for freedom and thinking twice about clarity. Signing on a petition line, speaking out for what's right. Raising our hand to question what's wrong. And thinking twice could lose yet another life. Mumia Abu Jamal. It's praying beyond the solitary confines of his cell walls for crimes he never committed, but instead for words he admitted. Speaking out, teaching others, fighting back, standing up against injustice. Mumia Abu Jamal. A people's hero sits awaiting an unwarranted execution. Signed by injustices draped in death codes. Minutes are ticking away and seconds fly by. Let me bring it back home. He is innocent. Kwang Chung Kao, an innocent civilian Asian man, shot to death in shady Sonoma County circumstances by brutal badges in front of his own home. They claim he appeared to take a threatening martial arts stance. Kwang Chung Kao, father, husband, neighbor, hero to his children. Let me bring it back home. He is innocent. As we sit unified and trying to identify, minutes are shut down. The battle wages on. The battle wages beyond. To break free, to learn about the self, to learn to extend the self, to extend the self beyond the systematic doctrines they speak, beyond these city walls, beyond your circle of friends, to extend the self to fight for freedom, to fight a system that enlists soldiers to step on those deemed less than pure, to release our rage, unleash our voices, refuse and resist. Stand in solidarity. Those who persist to deny us our right to cry for justice, to fight for freedom, to live for peace, to live for peace. As we sit unified and trying to identify, minutes are ticking away and seconds fly by.
From death row, this is Mumia Abu Jamal.
This is Mumia Alive, Mumia Free. Come on back, y'all. We got some more for you. I'd now like to introduce the co-producers of the CD we've been listening to, 175 Progress Drive. And they also produce Hard Knock Radio on KPFA, which is the Pacifica station at Berkeley. Anita Johnson, whose 3 words are for freedom means ancestors, Ashe, and mine. And Waylon Southern's got Inshallah, Flow, and Beauty. Come on up.
What's up, Anita? I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. This project has been quite an experience. I know that folks are getting a little bit antsy, and I know Elliot's got some things to say, so I know we want to keep it a little bit short. But the commentaries of Mumia that are on this CD were gathered from a lot of his friends and family who kept his tapes in the first weeks of his incarceration, and nobody quite knew what was going to happen. And it took a lot to get a lot of those tapes into a studio. And there are some priceless things on the CD. Mumia interviewing Bob Marley, Mumia interviewing Hugh Masekela, Mumia on NPR reporting on Jimmy Carter's campaign when NPR and All Things Considered deny that he was even a part of what they were doing. And for me, one of the most magical things on the album is a full-throated laugh from Mumia. It was when I heard him laughing, it made Mumia a human for me. I mean, I've heard about Mumia being, a Black Panther. I've heard about Mumia being a journalist. And in that moment of hearing him laugh out loud like that, it really brought home to me that he's a human being. He's a man, he's a husband, he's a son, he's a father. And I think that I would implore you to get a hold of the CD for that reason. All proceeds go to help him out. And that's really all I wanted to say. Yeah.
It's well obvious that he's Waylon and I'm Anita, right? I second everything Waylon has said. In the introduction, I heard a lot about, people not knowing about Mumia. The problem is not if you don't know about him, but you refuse to know of him. That's where the problem starts, and especially right now in the time of diversion, with all the chaos and everything that's happening right here in the United States of America, we must keep focused. We must be focused and understand that the cause can't be forgotten. People like Mumia Abu-Jamal, even sisters like Asada Shakur, exiled in Cuba, we must keep focused and steadfast. And definitely, my whole thing is not, I don't speak, I do a little bit of poetry, but my main mind thought is activism like this, and it's trying to get a message out. And it's really important just to pick it up and just learn where you can, and coming together like this, and Frank Sosa, and Stephanie. It's really important just to get and connect with the right people, and what also share with those that don't know. Don't look down on them. Just take the time just to, break it down. It's simple. It's very simple. And free Mumia.
Thank you so much, Anita and Waylon, for coming all the way down. It's really special that you could be here with us tonight. With no further ado, I would like to introduce Elliot Grossman, Mumia's attorney. Just before I do that, we're going to watch a tape of Arnold Beverly, who is actually the killer of Daniel Faulkner. He was, given clues about what happened back since the 80s, and but he said that he would never testify, and he refused to say who did it. And little by little, 2 years ago it came out, and he actually confessed to the crime. And now the legal team has recorded it so we can get it out. We want to get it out to the media. We want to get it out to everyone we know. So I'm going to put that on, and then Elliot Grossman will come up. He's going to speak and keep some questions in your mind, so we can make this a dialogue. It's like about 5 minutes, so maybe it's shorter than that.
My name is Arnold Beverly. I'm here to depose to the foregoing, and I'm willing to depose at any time in the courtroom of law. I, Arnold Beverly, state that the following facts are true and correct. I was present when Officer Daniel Faulkner was shot and killed in the early morning of December 9th, 1981, near the corner of 13th and Locust. I have personal knowledge that Mumia Abu-Jamal did not kill Officer Daniel Faulkner. In fact, I was hired, along with another guy, and paid to shoot and kill Faulkner. I heard that Faulkner was a problem for the mob and the corrupt policemen because he interfered with the graft and payoff made to allow illegal activity, including prostitution, gambling, drugs, without prosecution in the Center City area. Faulkner was shot once in the back and once in the face. before Jamal came on the scene. Jamal, again, had nothing to do with the shooting of Officer Daniel Faulkner. Before the shooting, I was given a picture of Faulkner. And I was told that Faulkner was supposed to check something out at Johnny D's bar at 13th and Locust Street, sometime in the early morning hours of December 9th. Two of us were hired for the shooting, so that one of us would get the opportunity to make the hit, get the job done, and leave. The other guy gave me a .38 caliber policeman special. I also carried my own gun, which was a .22 caliber revolver. I waited at the speed line entrance at the northeast corner of 13th at the parking lot. I was wearing a green camouflage jacket. The other guy waited at the south side of Locust Street on the east 13th Street towards Kamak Street. While I was waiting at the speed line entrance for Faulkner to arrive on location, I saw police officers in the area. Two undercover policemen were there, were standing on the west side of 13th Street. Also, a uniformed police officer was sitting in a car at the corner of the parking lot. They were there while the shooting of Faulkner took place. I was not worried about the police being there, since I believed that since I was hired by the mob to shoot and kill Faulkner, any police officer in the area on the scene would be there to help me. After a while, when I saw Faulkner get out of a small police car parked behind a VW on Locust Street, east of 13th Street, Faulkner was alone. He got out of the police car and went up to the VW. I heard a shot. It rang out from the east on Locust Street. Faulkner fell to one knee on the sidewalk next to the Volkswagen. I heard another shot that must have grazed my left shoulder. I felt something hard on my left shoulder, and I grabbed at my shoulder. I got blood on my hand. I ran across the street, stood over top of Faulkner, and aimed and shot him in the face at close range. Jamal was shot shortly after that by a uniformed police officer who arrived on the scene. Cop cars came from all directions. Foot patrol also arrived. I saw a white shirt getting out of a car in the middle of 13th Street, just as I was going down the speed line steps. I left the area underground through the high-speed system, and by pre-arrangement, I met a police officer who assisted me when I exited the speed line underground. About 1 block away, a car was waiting for me that took me out of Center City area.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Elliot Grossman.
Well, I have a question for everybody here, and a question I'd like to ask Judge Yan, the federal judge who's hearing Mumia's case, and that I'd like to ask Judge Denby, who's the state of Pennsylvania judge who's also hearing the case in the state court, and that I'd like to ask the governor of Pennsylvania, the new governor, since the old governor has now taken over the Office of Homeland Terrorism. And the question is, why is Mumia Abu-Jamal still in prison on death row? Why is Mumia Jamal still not free? The man who did it has confessed. The man who did it has said that Mumia had nothing to do with it. But Mumia remains in prison. We have filed this confession. When we first came into the case, and I should say I am one of a team of 4 attorneys who have taken over the representation of Mumia Abu-Jamal as of May the 4th of this year. The other attorneys are Marlene Kamish from Chicago, and Nick Brown, who's a British barrister in London, and J. Michael Farrell, who is a local Philadelphia attorney. When we took over this case, because Mumia fired his previous attorneys, because little by little it began to come together that his previous attorneys had sold him down the river, which I will talk about in a little while. He fired them and he hired us to take over his case. When we came into the case on May the 4th, we filed the written confession signed by Arnold Beverly back in June of 1999. And we also filed the lie detector test that Arnold Beverly took and passed, showing that he was telling the truth. And we filed also, for the first time, you see, in the original trial, since Mumia was denied the right to represent himself, and the trial just turned into a farce, and the judge threw him out of half of his trial for trying to insist on his right to defend himself, Mumia never had the chance to testify. When they finally said, okay, now you can testify, he declined to do so because the entire trial was a farce. The previous attorneys representing Mumia, Leonard Weinglass and Daniel Williams, told Mumia not to testify in 1995 during the state post-conviction proceedings, even though he was ready and willing to testify. Mumia's brother, William Cook, who was there at the scene when it all came down, and the whole incident started when the police officer stopped a car being driven by William Cook, was ready to testify in 1995 to say what actually happened and to testify that Mumia was not involved in any way in the shooting of the police officer. But Mumia's previous attorneys told him not to testify, and he didn't testify. So when we came into the case, we also filed for the first time Mumia's own account, his written statement under penalty of perjury, his testimony as to what happened that night, and his brother William Cook's testimony in two declarations. One that William Cook had signed back in June of 1999, the same time that Arnold Beverly signed his confession, and another more detailed declaration by William Cook that we had obtained. And basically, Arnold Beverly's explained that he was hired by the Philadelphia Police Department itself, which is to say corrupt elements in the Philadelphia Police Department, working with organized crime, because Arnold Beverly is a professional killer. He's a hitman. That's his occupation. And he and accomplice were hired to kill Faulkner because the police in Philadelphia in that time period had a racket going where they were basically selling protection to all of the people involved in illegal activity in Center City, Philadelphia, and getting their cut. At the same time this was going on, there were 3 independent FBI investigations of corruption in the Philadelphia Police Department, which eventually resulted in 30 police officers, including the assistant chief of police, being indicted and convicted, including the police captain who oversaw the entire Central City area where the murder of Faulkner took place, and the head of homicide for the Philadelphia Police Department was an unindicted co-conspirator in those prosecutions. Now, what really happened that night, and what Mumia would have testified to if he'd ever had the opportunity to, which he's finally been given the opportunity to, was that Mumia was in his cab. He was parked on 13th Street, north of Locust Street, in front of an after-hours club at 4 o'clock in the morning, which is when the clubs get out, because he was waiting to pick up passengers. Because this was a spot where people were coming out of the bars, and there were a lot of potential clients there to pick up if you were a cab driver. He heard gunfire. He got out of his cab to see what was going on, and what he saw was his brother standing down on Locust Street looking dazed, and he ran toward his brother, and the next thing he knew, he got shot, and he went down, and the next thing he knew after that, he woke up, and there were a whole crowd of policemen around him kicking the shit out of him, and that is what happened. Now we know from Arnold Beverly's side of the story what actually was going on there. Now, the present situation in Mumia's case is we now have clear and convincing evidence that he did not do it and he's innocent. The district attorney's office takes the position that, guess what? It's too late. According to them, there are legal technicalities that say there's a deadline to prove that you're innocent. And Mumia is too late, according to them, and therefore they don't care that he's innocent, and they've told the federal judge and they've told the state judge that they shouldn't care either, and they should just execute him regardless because he's too late. Now, does this make any sense whatsoever? Obviously, no, it doesn't. Is this the law? We don't think it is. But if it is the law, then any legal system that holds that as a basic principle obviously deserves no respect and should clearly be overthrown and destroyed and replaced with a just legal system. Now, we have just filed another declaration under penalty of perjury in both the federal and the state court from a court reporter named Terry Mare Carter. When we were in Philadelphia on August the 17th, which was our first appearance in the state court, we received a telephone call from this woman saying she wanted to do whatever she could to help Mumia, and she wanted to talk to us, but she had important information that we had to hear. And Marlene Kamish and I made arrangements to speak with her, and she came forward, and she told us that during the time of Mumia's original trial, back in 1982, she was working in the courthouse as a court reporter, and she happened to be going through the antechambers of the court. It was kind of like a little office there, and she overheard a conversation between Judge Sable, who was the judge at Mumia's trial and was the judge in 1995 when they had the post-conviction hearings. Now, we always knew that Judge Sable was a racist dog. And we always knew that there was no way that anyone who was black or Mexican or any other minority could possibly get a fair trial in front of Judge Sable. And we always knew that Mumia did not get a fair trial in front of Judge Sable, but we didn't have direct evidence to prove that he was the racist dog that we know that he is. But what Terry Maurer Carter came forward and told us was that when she was in the antechambers of the court, she overheard Judge Sable speaking to someone else during like a break in the trial and overheard him say the following. And I'm going to apologize to you for having to use a word that I removed from my vocabulary when I came to consciousness about what it means to be white and live in racist white America. But I have to use that word in order to convey to you the full horror of what went on in the court in Pennsylvania at that time. But what she overheard Judge Sabo say in reference to Mumia Abu-Jamal was the following. Yeah, and I'm going to help him fry the nigger. That is what Judge Sabo said. This is the man who supposedly was administering justice to Mumia Abu-Jamal during his trial. This is the man who supposedly was evaluating in 1995 whether Mumia Abu-Jamal's constitutional rights had been violated. This exposes even more than anything that had previously been put forward what it is to receive a, quote, fair trial if you are black in racist white America. The case of Mumia Abu-Jamal is a case which should, if everyone here and everyone around the country and the world who's concerned with the case will come forward and do everything that we can do to get the word out as to what's actually happening here and what a horror this case is. This is the case that should destroy the death penalty in the United States, because this case strips bare every single illusion in this hypocritical system and fully exposes what a mockery of justice it is. Now, what's happened to Mumia is there is not a single constitutional right that anyone is supposed to have that has not been totally destroyed, eviscerated, spat upon and shat upon in the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal. First of all, the man is innocent. He didn't do it. We got the proof of that now. When he went to trial, it became very clear to him early on that his court-appointed attorney, Anthony Jackson, did not have the backbone to stand up to the powers that be in Philadelphia and give him the defense that he needed to win the case. So Mumia decided that the only thing he could do was to take over his representation himself and be his own lawyer, represent himself. And in the early pretrial stages of the trial, he was allowed to do that, which is a constitutional right. And he was involved in the jury selection phase. At the beginning of the trial, you get to cross-examine basically each of the potential jurors to find out whether they could be a fair juror or not, and you get to excuse a certain number of them. And since Mumia was a professional journalist, and one of his greatest skills is interviewing people, he was doing a great job during the jury selection. And the prosecution had to get rid of a number of potential jurors because they said they liked Mumia so much, they couldn't see any possible way that they could vote for his execution or convict him. So the Judge Sabo, decided, and the prosecutor decided, they better get Mumia out of this role of representing himself because it looked like maybe they were going to actually lose this case. So the judge decided Mumia was taking too long. Some of the jurors were afraid of Mumia, supposedly, which was a lie, and took the jury selection out of his hands, wouldn't let him do it anymore, had his court-appointed attorney do, the incompetent job that continued. When the trial was about to begin, Mumia asked for a microphone because he's a very soft-spoken man. He wanted the jury to be able to hear him. Judge Sabo refused to give him the microphone. And at that point, Mumia insisted on a point that he'd been asking for over and over again, which was he wanted a friend of his, a very close personal friend of his, John Africa, who was not an attorney, to be able to sit with him in court at the counsel table and advise him and help him when he was defending himself. And Mumia explained to me, one of the first times I went to prison to talk with him about his case, why he wanted John Africa. John Africa was the founder and the leader of the MOVE organization in Philadelphia. And the reason Mumia wanted him wasn't because of the philosophy of John Africa or the politics of John Africa or the politics of the MOVE organization. It was because when Mumia was a journalist in Philadelphia, he actually covered the trial when the government put John Africa on trial with other people from the MOVE organization and had framed them up on all of these terrorism and weapons charges, and they were facing like 300 years in prison. John Africa refused to have an attorney. Some of the other people had attorneys, and he took over the defense. And John Africa was this incredible, charismatic man. He would go into court every day. They brought him down from New York because they were afraid to have him in Philadelphia. And they'd have him in shackles the whole way. They'd bring him in. He was on a hunger fast for about a month because he didn't like being shackled. And they wanted to force feed him, so he would do 300 push-ups in the courtroom at the beginning of the court session to show the judge he didn't have to be force-fed. And before the trial would begin each morning, he'd go over to the prosecutor, put his hands on his shoulders and go, "You're going to lose. You're going to lose." Then, when the trial would begin and the witnesses would be testifying, John Africa would kick back in his seat and he'd sleep through the trial. But he was listening the whole time, and during the breaks, there was another person in the MOVE organization with him who could not read or write, but who had a photographic memory. And John Africa would tell him what questions to ask of the witnesses, and he would memorize the questions. And without notes, he would cross-examine all the witnesses. Then, the other thing that happened during the trial was that John Africa insisted that there would be no objection at all, that the prosecution could put in all the evidence they wanted. He wanted everybody to hear everything. And they had these tapes because they were surveilling the MOVE house, and they had tapes that they wanted to play of things that people said. So John Africa said, "Fine, but you got to play all the tapes." So they had to play an entire week of 24 hours a day, listening to people in the MOVE house, getting up in the morning, going to the bathroom, going pee-pee, washing the dishes, walking the dogs, cleaning the house, etc. Then when it came time to give the final speeches to the jury, John Africa woke up, gave this incredible speech to the jury. It was so silent in the courtroom you could hear a pin drop. He didn't talk about the evidence against them at all. What he talked about was how the prosecution symbolized the forces of death and destruction that were destroying our society and destroying the lives of the people on the jury and destroying the environment. And you had a jury of white, middle-class, suburban jurors. It was like your perfect hanging jury. And no one could believe that John Africa was doing this. And Mumia himself thought, this is incredible, but they're going to get convicted. They're going to go away for 300 years. And when the jury came back, the verdict was not guilty on all counts. So Mumia said, I want John Africa to help me, because if I have John Africa, I know I can win this trial. And the judge himself, during a meeting in chambers between the judge and the court-appointed attorney, Anthony Jackson, and the prosecutor, the judge said, you know, if I gave him John Africa, I know there'd be cross-examination. And they talked about all the problems that could happen. So in any case, the end result was that Mumia was railroaded in his trial. He got convicted. He got the death sentence. They used against him in his trial political speeches he had made when he was 14 years old in the Black Panther Party in Philadelphia. They used that as a reason to tell the jury that they should execute him. In 1995, there were the post-conviction proceedings, and I don't want to take the time to go through the entire litany, but let me just give you one little piece. We've got one piece of the puzzle with Arnold Beverly. There's another piece of the puzzle with somebody named Kenny Freeman. Kenny Freeman was also involved in the killing of Officer Faulkner. Kenny Freeman's involvement was hidden by the prosecution in the original trial. Mumia's own attorney in the original trial could have cross-examined and brought it out and won the trial right then and there, just with Kenny Freeman, not even getting into the Arnold Beverly part, and didn't do it. The appeals lawyer, who used to be the boss for Anthony Jackson when he was becoming an attorney, never brought up the fact that this hadn't happened. And Leonard Weinglass and Daniel Williams, the previous attorneys from Mumia, who we replaced, also suppressed this evidence. So who was Kenny Freeman? Well, let me explain it this way. The key witness against Mumia at his trial was a prostitute named Cynthia White. Cynthia White testified, according to her, that she actually saw Mumia shoot Faulkner to death. Now, Cynthia White had testified several weeks before at the trial of Mumia's brother, William Cook. They put him up on trial of minor misdemeanor charges of resisting an officer. Because, see, what had happened was that Officer Faulkner stopped the car that Billy Cook was driving, and at some point during this, incident, Faulkner was shot, Mumia was shot, and then Mumia was prosecuted for the killing of Faulkner. In Billy Cook's trial, Cynthia White testified there was a passenger in Billy Cook's car, and the passenger got out of the car. Now, this is very significant, because in Mumia's trial, she never said anything about a passenger. And the same prosecutor who prosecuted Billy Cook prosecuted Mumia and specifically asked her, no one else was there besides Mumia and his brother Billy and Officer Faulkner. Isn't that right? And she goes, that's right, and that was a lie. And the prosecutor had her lie. But the prosecutor's whole theory against Mumia at his trial was that only 3 people were there when it happened. Faulkner, Billy Cook, and Mumia. Billy had nothing to do with it. The only person who could possibly have killed Faulkner was Mumia. But all that they had to prove to throw out that theory and win the trial in the original trial was that there was someone else there who could have done the killing. And that someone else was the passenger in Billy Cook's car. And that someone else is named Kenny Freeman. In approximately June of 99 or May of 99, the same time Arnold Beverly signed his confession, Billy Cook signed a written statement saying that Freeman had confessed to him after the incident that he was involved in the shooting, that there was a plot to kill Faulkner that night, that Freeman had a gun and participated in the shooting. Now, Freeman, curiously enough, was found dead the day after the Philadelphia police bombed the Move House. He was handcuffed, he was stark naked, found in a vacant lot, shot up with drugs, an apparent suicide. All that Mumia's attorney had to do in the original trial was to prove up Kenneth Freeman being there. Just get up there in front of Cynthia White and say, now, isn't it true that you testified in Billy Cook's trial that there was a passenger? Yes, no. She says, no. Let me read your testimony to the jury from the previous trial. The passenger got out. Having done that, all that he had to do then was put on Billy Cook and ask him, well, who was the passenger in your car? Kenny Freeman. Put Kenny Freeman on the witness stand. Isn't it true that you shot Officer Faulkner? Yes, no. I refuse to answer. Fifth Amendment, whatever it is, not guilty. But that wasn't done. And it's very clear that there's something very rotten that's been going on in the case of Mumia from the very beginning. That there are very powerful and very ruthless people behind the murder of police officer Faulkner. And whoever it is, who's obviously still around someplace, responsible for that killing, wanted to make sure that there was a fall guy for it and the trail would never lead back to them. Leonard Weinglass, the previous attorney for Mumia, received a death threat from Kenny Freeman's brother, who told him, if anything comes out about Kenny in this case, you are dead meat. And nothing about Kenny ever came out. And when Arnold Beverly came forward in June of '99 and signed his confession, they just stuck it in their pockets and they never brought it forward. Now that we have found this evidence and we've put it forward to the courts, they're using against us, the prosecution and the judges, the AEDPA, the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act that was passed by Congress when Clinton was president, and which Clinton, a Democrat, signed into law. Now that law should be called the State Terrorism and Defective Death Penalty Act, because that's what it is. So the other question is, why is this going on? Because the ruling class in this country needs to have a death penalty to use as a weapon of terror against the working class in this country, against the black community, against the Mexican community, against the Arab community, certainly, against the immigrant communities, and against the left and any progressive movement in this country. We have a history of murdering political dissidents in this country. The Sacco Vanzetti case, Italian anarchist in the 1920s, the Rosenberg case in the 1950s, the so-called Atom spies. It was almost the Angela Davis case in the 1960s when they framed her up for being involved in the incident at San Quentin when George Jackson was killed. And the San Quentin Six were put on trial, and she was, fortunately because of the political mobilization around her case, able to win her case and be acquitted. And that's what we need around the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal, is we need your support. We need political support, because we understand that in America, spelled with a K, it's not sufficient to win the case in the courtroom. This case needs to be won in the streets, in the factories, in the workplaces, with the mobilization of the working class in this country. Now, the Longshoremen's Union has shown the way. Last year, there was a 24-hour strike by longshoremen and warehousemen up and down the entire West Coast in Canada, demanding not higher wages, not shorter hours, demanding a new trial for Mumia Abu-Jamal. And that is what we need. We need to mobilize, we need to get the word out, and we need to rouse the workers in this country to use the power that they have to make sure that Mumia is freed. Thank you. So if there's any questions anyone would like to ask, I'd be happy to answer them, or try to answer them.
Where are we going to go from here? What are the next steps? What should we be waiting for? What should we mobilize around?
Okay, what the situation is this, basically. When we came into the case was in federal court in the United States District Court in Philadelphia, which is the trial court, on a petition for habeas corpus, which is basically saying that Mumia's constitutional rights were violated, his conviction should be thrown out. We came into court, we filed all this evidence, which we talked about. And then we realized that because of the AEDPA, we needed to take the new evidence down into state court and give the state court a chance to look at it. So we wrote a 275-page document. We filed it in state court, put all the evidence there, and the DA immediately said, it's too late, you can't hear it, so we're in a battle in state court now as to whether the judge is even going to hear it. At the same time, we're in a battle in federal court, having asked the judge for the chance to take the deposition of Arnold Beverly, because before the mafia and the Philadelphia police kill him, we want to get his statement under oath with the prosecutor there, being able to cross-examine just like in court, so the evidence is established and they can't refuse to acknowledge it. So we're in a battle over that and a battle to get a hearing in either one of the courts. We're not waiting for everything. We're doing everything we can to put additional evidence into the record and to focus all the pressure we possibly can on the courts to actually give us a hearing. Let Arnold Beverly come into the courtroom, get on the witness stand, testify under oath as to what really happened. The district attorney can ask him any question he wants. And let's get at the truth of this matter, and let's get Mumia out of there. So what we need is for people to spread the information about what's really happening here, to break through the media blockade, because we're getting almost no coverage of this on television or radio. We're getting coverage in Philadelphia in the newspapers and on the radio there, but there's very little coverage of also have a consciousness of feeling guilt and a capacity to do good. And for 20 years, he's had to live with the fact that not only did he stand over another man, look him straight in the eyes and shoot him to death, but another man is going to die because of his act. And he's decided to come forward and take responsibility. Now, the question that I would ask is, given that Arnold Beverly, regardless of what he's done in the past, is willing to do this, the brother's willing to come forward and take responsibility, why aren't people asking why Senator John Kerry won't come forward and take responsibility for murdering those 11 Vietnamese women and children and old people that he committed when he was a war criminal in Vietnam? Next question. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to talk with anyone after the event. And thank you very much for coming. And I want to express our gratitude, not only on the part of the legal team, but from Mumia also, for your support. It really means a lot to Mumia, isolated there at 175 Progress Drive on death row, to know that people like yourselves are here supporting him and doing whatever you can to get him out. Because we know if any of us were there, Mumia would be out here doing the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Elliot. This is Mumia Live, Mumia Free, and that's the night. We thank you for all the poets. Thank you for the producers of 175 Progress Drive. Thank you, Elliot. Thank all of you for coming. Thank all the artists on the wall. And get your CDs, get your T-shirts, get your candles, burn them with love for Mumia. Write him, send him pictures, and tell your friends, get the word out, and thank you, we bless you. And thanks, Frank, So, good night, Mumia Live, Mumia Free, that's it. Mumia Alive, Mumia Free, welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm Stephanie Abraham. I'll be your host for the evening. We have a dynamite show for you. I hope you've enjoyed the books, the magazines. We want to thank Frank Sosa for offering us a home for this very important event for our brother Mumia. I hope you've enjoyed the wonderful artwork. A lot of artists are in the house, so we want to give them a big thanks. And we're going to start off with a track from our CD, our new CD that we're celebrating tonight. We're celebrating life and freedom and all these wonderful things. And the new CD is called 175 Progress Drive. And for me, that just kind of like captures the essence of like Americanism. Because see, they build this big ass death row and high maximum security prison in the middle of the suburbs, right? In the middle of Whiteville, and they house all our brown and black brothers and sisters there. And then they call the street they build it on Progress Drive. So anyway, this is Asada Shakur, and she's going to open with a story of who Mumia Abu Jamal is.
I'm Asada Shakur.